Our next performer, you've already seen him once tonight. Please welcome back Danny Cochran. One more time, big round of applause for Danny Cochran. Wow. That was intense. Oh, hi. All right. Thank you for making this a great event and coming out to support STAR, Planned Parenthood, ANTHC, and Vox, Voices for Planned Parenthood here at UAA. There is obviously a great need for you to engage in these groups. We don't want your involvement to stop tonight. Please take your program home and connect with these agencies and see what you can do in our community to make a difference. We need your voice. If you're a student, please make sure to check, please make sure to check out the Vox table after the show and join us at our next meeting. Before we close out with our last piece, we want to thank our sponsors again, of course, the UAA Concert Board's Special Projects Funds, and the UAA Club Council. For those that bid on art, please join us in the lobby after the show to see if you were the top bidder for your piece. And thank you all again for your support. As our closing piece, here's the president of Vox, Amber Sawyer, with a personal story. Please welcome Amber to the stage.
Everyone, no matter their gender or economic class, goes through some point in their life where things are just too much for them to handle. For most people, this happens around adolescence. When this point happens, you feel as though you can sink no lower, that you've hit the bottom. Many develop disorders such as depression or anorexia. That's why they teach us about these things in class. Every person comes up with their own individual way to deal with the stress. I dealt with this stress by taking up self-mutilation. After one of my friends discovered me in the bathroom at school after a suicide attempt, I went through therapy and learned to turn myself off to extreme stresses in order to handle them and not revert to self-mutilation again. My freshman year of high school was just after I had completed my therapy, and I was released from it. I made the basketball team with all my friends, but within weeks, due to injury, I could no longer play. I was told I would never play basketball again. While my friends were away on trips, I was alone, especially at lunchtime. So when a guy invited me to have lunch with him and his friends, I was too lonely to turn him down. It was better than sitting by myself in a crowded lunchroom, right? Kind of stick out. He and his friends seemed perfectly nice, though they were older and more mature than my friends and I were at the time. The boy who had invited me to sit with him asked me to be his girlfriend within just a few weeks. He made me feel so special, always telling me how good I looked and going out of his way to help me. He was my first kiss. He came home to meet my family, and my redneck dad took him out into the garage and threatened him while cleaning one of his guns. Very stereotypical, and between this and the fact that we had a deer head hanging over our fireplace with another gun underneath it, I knew the guy had to take my dad seriously. I felt pretty secure between this fact and how nice the guy seemed. So, at first, I didn't have a problem with being alone in his room with him. In fact, whenever we were at his place, we were alone in his room. For a few months, there was no problems. It seemed like the perfect relationship. And then one night, things changed. We were watching a movie, and we started kissing and getting intimate. He kept putting his hands on me, even after I would move my body or his hands. I asked him to stop, and I said I wasn't ready, but he just got rough and covered my mouth with his. I was wearing my favorite skirt, and I was unable to stop him from getting underneath it. That night, when my dad picked me up, I was very quiet. I was too hurt, too much in shock to cry. I couldn't process what had just happened to me. My dad asked if I was all right, and I just told him I was tired, and because it was late, he didn't question it. When we got home, I told him I was going to shower and go to sleep, so he went to bed. I put on some music, and then got into the shower where I fell apart. I was practically hysterical as I cried, and went through in my mind every thrust, every grab, and could not help but feel him violate me all over again. I cried and scrubbed for over 2 hours before getting out of the shower. I put on my baggiest pajamas, curled into bed, and tried to forget the way his body felt against me. I barely slept that night because every time I fell asleep, I felt it all over again. Then the next day, I wanted to erase it from my memory, so I decided to do just that. I used the skills I had learned in therapy, and I pretended as though nothing had happened. I did my homework and chores the next day as I normally would, and my parents never suspected a thing. I told myself I could control it if I really tried, and I could avoid the situation if I needed to. But I was wrong. Every time I would try to do something different, whether it was sitting on the floor instead of the bed, wearing ugly clothing, it didn't make a difference in the slightest. I was violated repeatedly in the worst ways possible. He tied me down once after arranging for his parents to be gone so they wouldn't hear me scream. Another time, he tried to get his friend in on raping me. His friend didn't join, but rather sat and watched. Over and over, for 6 months, he took me against my will. I would try to avoid being in his home, tried to avoid being alone with him, but nothing was working. Finally, I got up the strength to dump him in front of his parents where he couldn't do anything about it. He looked furious, like he wanted to wring my neck. His parents wouldn't even drive me home. When my dad picked me up, I started to cry. And I told him I had been dumped. I couldn't think of any other way to explain to him why I was crying without telling him how I had been hurt, and I could barely tell myself. How do you tell your father that his only daughter had been raped at the mere age of 14? Besides,